friends. Welcome back to Live at the Roxy. We have a lot to break down today, and that doesn't mean we have a lot of topics to break down today, although there was a ton going on in the world. But we have a lot to break down in one very specific topic that we have been talking about here on this show nonstop for a long time, and that is Ray Fisher, who is finally speaking fully and more. I know you guys have been asking for details, so more detailed about what happened with the Justice League investigations, what happened with Joss Whedon, what happened with Jeff Johns and John Berg, and everything that took place on Justice League and the set of Justice League and the production of Justice League. So he finally did, and I don't say finally like he didn't want to previously. I say finally like something contractually maybe happened that he was able to do this, or he just said enough was enough. Whatever it is, he was able to fully kind of reveal, and I'm sure when I say fully, it's still not fully. I'm sure there are things that he still can't say, but he was able to really reveal what took place in a long sit down with the Hollywood Reporter. And honestly, today we're going to break down the entire article. We're going to read through a lot of it. We're going to talk about how we feel, you guys at home, me, myself, and I, and just really give this man his due. And I just mean giving him the time to discuss what it is that he says and what it is that this article talks about. I'll say this now that this article is written by Kim Masters. It came out on April 6th, which is today at 6 a.m. And I have not seen, I've seen some people talking about it, but I've not seen it get the kind of press that I was expecting it to get, especially after reading through the entire article, which takes a little bit of time to really break down. There's a lot of new information, and I'm excited to break it down. And again, a lot of my word choice here might sound strange. Don't mean excited as in I'm excited that any of this happened to Ray Fisher. I'm excited to break it down as in I'm finally excited to have some of our questions be answered and to be able to answer some of your questions as well. So that's what our plan is for today, live at the Roxy on this Tuesday. But before we get into that, of course, as always, I'm going to start in the Streamlabs, streamlabs.com/Roxy Striar. For those of you guys who don't know, this is a fan-funded show. Thanks to you guys. I am fully fan-funded, which is incredible. You guys are the rock stars of all rock stars, which means that if you can give me support, Streamlabs is the best way to do so. Streamlabs.com/Roxy Striar. Super Chat is great as well, although this past year, what we found out was that the tubes of you ended up taking over 50% of our super chats, which is totally fucking lame. So I still get 50% of it, but YouTube bones you as hard as they can. And so I really appreciate if you would take the extra 2 seconds just to go over to Streamlabs. Again, streamlabs.com/Roxy Striar. That would be immensely helpful for me. All right, let's see. The first person to send in the Streamlabs for today's show is officially Glenn Caesar. Glenn Caesar says, Miles Cosgrove, Brett Hankison, Jonathan Mattingly, wrestler cops who killed Breonna Taylor, all three of them for killing Breonna Taylor. Hope today is the day. Justice for all the people who've lost their lives due to excessive force. Hashtag say their names. Couldn't agree more, Glenn. And thank you for always starting the show off right. It is one of the most important things that we talk about here and say here. And so I'm glad that you are always the reminder and that you gave us the idea to end the show with it as well, because saying it just once is not enough and clearly has not been enough because we are not screaming it loudly enough because they have not fucking heard us. So we'll continue to do so. For those of you guys who are commenting on the fact that I lost my shirt, I did not. I am simply in an overlay. Look, she wears a shirt. She lives. I'm going to put the overlay back on though because Jake Yacovetta worked really hard on them, and it also reminds you all the ways to support me. You dig? All right, going back to the Streamlabs, streamlabs.com/Roxy Striar. Glenn Caesar says, hello, good afternoon, Roxy, and all your nicknames. Thanks for always being there and here for us, RJ, and everyone who shows up to give their support whenever, however they can when it gets tough, even if you're by yourself, so you're not alone. Everyone who is battling, keep on fighting. You're a winner. You're kind, you're smart, you're unique, and being so unselfishly loving and supportive of others, including strangers on the internet or not, makes you worthy. Your story is important and deserves to be seen and heard. It's true, so I gotta make you say, congrats, Roxy, on SEN Live and all that's in the works and now unfolding in the new adventures of Roxy. Roxy RJ Chunk is fucking fire. Roxy's best Roxy number one. Roxy's best Roxy number one. Yeah. Happy Roxy days. Let's go Smets and everyone fighting for today, tomorrow, and more. Smash cancer all day, every day. By the way, guys, it is Kevin Smets' birthday today, so please wish him happy birthday. I've been texting with him. He got to spend the morning with his beautiful wife and beautiful daughter, and he's in a little bit of pain today because he's been undergoing treatment, as you guys know. And so when I say a little bit, I'm definitely underestimating the amount of pain he's in. So if you could just tweet at him, send him some love, let him know how appreciated he is, that would be great. Glenn also said, be most excellent, RJ. Rockstar, show up for people who need it. It makes you dope as fuck, humane and worthy. Cheers to fuck yeah news and laughter for all of us. Thank you, Glenn. We appreciate you. Adrian Bailey in the house says, hi, Roxy. I got to spend some time with the World Girls / Live with the Roxy gang on Zoom. Shout out to Rob Fishbeck and Glenn Caesar for welcoming me into the group. This is because of you, Roxy. That is amazing, Adrian. I'm so happy to hear that. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. You are the best. Love you. Yes. Love when you guys become friends. Welcome to the Zoom crew. Noah says, fuck yeah news. The Zoloft seems to be helping, and I've found the motivation to do clean and do all of my laundry, including folding. Today, I feel like a person again. That's amazing, Noah. I'm glad that you're seeking out the help that you need, and I hope that you supplement that with finding more ways than just Zoloft to find the happiness in your life. Zoloft can be a great tool, but also you got to do the inner work. And I know that you're working on that. So I'm so glad that you're cleaning your life really makes a difference. I know that you guys know I'm not much of a believer, but when they say cleanliness is next to godliness, I do understand that feeling like you have an organized life helps your brain stay organized as well. So I really, really think, Noah, this is a great step. And folding laundry can be really therapeutic. I love to fold. I know I'm bizarre. I'm a strange one. Morse Code Z in the Streamlab says, just want to say you, Winston, Ben, once a month at least. No, Brett, what? So you enjoyed today's show, huh, Morse Code Z? I'm glad. Thank you guys for showing up over there on SEN Live. I really appreciate y'all. Jake Yakavetta in the Streamlab says, glad to be back. Got a lot to catch up on. Yeah, Jake, it's like you didn't even watch while you were gone on vacation at the wedding. Do you even care about me still? Are you even still my mod? How dare you take a couple days off and give me plenty weeks notice? How dare you? Just kidding, Jake. Welcome back. So happy to have you. You're awesome. And I'm just so glad that you are back in one piece. How was the wedding? Let us know. It seemed like a ton of fun. Although you told me you would tweet pictures with the rock stars and tweet them at me, and you did not. And I did see you tweeted with another fandom. So, just showing your cards, Jake. Just showing your cards. Going back into the Streamlabs, Travis Gilbert says, I've finally been working on not being, let's say, as large. So I've gotten a new Fitbit and working on getting ready to climb a mountain with my oldest son in 2 weeks. Anyone have a Fitbit and want to give me more motivation? Use Rid Travis D. Gilbert. What does use Rid mean? I don't know what that part is. I don't have a Fitbit. But I do think that you have plenty of motivation. The fact that you're doing this with your son is such big motivation within itself, because you got to make sure you get to the goal. And I'm so proud of you. And you becoming less large is a great way of putting it. And good things come in small packages. Like moi. Oh, Travis says user ID Travis D. Gilbert. Oh, it says it when you send it in anyway. But thank you for doubling up. Appreciate you, Travis. Appreciate all you guys. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, all that stuff, streamlabs.com/Roxy Striar, or right here in the super chat throughout the stream as we're going to be breaking down the Ray Fisher situation. Before we get into that, though, Garth Harkness McMurray says, sorry that I'm currently broke and couldn't help donate a bunch on SEN Live. You had a great idea and wanted to see more people donate more to get more shots and truths. Good news. I got my second Moderna vaccination shot today and no bad side effects yet. That's awesome news. Congratulations, Garth. I hope that you have no side effects in general. And I hope that you just keep on keeping on. SEN, at least we made, we got to that 700 mark, which is good. I was hoping to do 1,000 again, because then hopefully Christian keeps me in that hosting chair. But we didn't quite make it there. So if he doesn't keep me there, then that's on you all. I understand, though. I'm broke as a joke, too. So we just do what we can. We just do what we can. Jake's speaking, but he's not addressing anything that I talked about. Jake, what do you have to say for yourself? Big Mo wasn't able to make it out. There were no Ubers available the night he could, and Susie couldn't get an Epcot pass because they're not allowing cast members to get tickets. Oh, got you. That sucks. Well, then I guess you're off the hook, Jake Iacovetta. You're always off the hook. Steven says, Jake is sus. Jake is sus. He is sus. You know who's not sus? Ray Fisher. You know who's been telling us how it is since the second things happened? Ray Fisher. So let's break down Ray Fisher's account and Ray Fisher's long interview with The Hollywood Reporter. Are y'all ready for this? By a show of bunnies, who has read this entire article? Send bunnies if you've read it. Send hearts if you have not. I am going to be reading it all, so it doesn't really matter if you guys have read it, because not all of it, but I am going to be reading the majority of it, because as I was taking screenshots, look at this shit, guys. Today I was taking screenshots. As I was going through the article, I took screenshots of all of the parts that I wanted to read to you guys, and I was like, oh, this is a good way to do it. I'll just do screenshots, and then I'll go through all of the things that I want to tell them. And then this is just one of the pages. I mean, it just scrolls. There was just so many things that I wanted to share with you guys that I was like, well, sounds like we should go through the entire article. Okay, more hearts than bunnies. So a lot of you guys haven't even seen this yet. That's what I'm talking about. It's so bizarre that this has been such a huge story. And today it wasn't even discussed that much. It was trending a little bit on social media, so that made me happy to see, because his words deserve to be heard. And I feel awful, and I'm sure he's tired of not being believed. So let's break this down. The article is titled, Ray Fisher opens up about Justice League, Joss Whedon, and Warner's, quote, I don't believe some of these people are fit for leadership, end quote. I feel like usually they'll put something very in the title. They'll put something very clickbaity. That was really not clickbaity. The quote, I don't believe some of these people are fit for leadership, is one of the least big quotes in this entire article. I mean, he's talking about racist, sexist accusations, and he's also talking about really poor treatment. So for them to put that in there, I was like, that's interesting. Usually they really come with like, oh, a pow headline, and that one's kind of just a little bit of what it was. So I thought that was interesting, an interesting way for a Hollywood Reporter to do this. But I do think that this article really tried to take a 360 view at what was going on, because they not only include quotes from Ray Fisher in this sit-down interview, but they also include quotes from a lot of other people, including a spokesperson for Jeff Johns, who is mentioned many times in here, and has a spokesperson responding to some of these accusations. So they definitely do try to offer a variety of opinions, and I always trust an article more that does do that, so it doesn't feel so one-sided. Okay, so this is what is, I don't need to go over the backstory. This you guys know. The first part of the article just kind of breaks down what it is that we were talking about, what we've talked about on this show all of the time, which is that Ray Fisher was on the set of Justice League with Zack Snyder. Oh my God, me blanking on, I was like, Snyder Cut, John Snyder, with Zack Snyder. And then obviously felt like he somewhat got the rug pulled from under him when we switched over to Joss Whedon, who was not dealing with things the same way that Zack Snyder was, and to a really, really aggressive extent that we're going to talk about here. But you guys know that story. We've talked about it several times. We know that Zack Snyder had to leave the project. We know Joss Whedon was brought in on the project. And then we know we got that movie that was Justice League in 2017 that did not resemble what we just saw as the Zack Snyder Justice League this year in 2021. So that's a lot of the backstory that they kind of break down for the first part of this, and then they get into the actual interview. Part of this interview still is, it's not redacted, but he is not speaking on those on some things, because he says in here, quote, I'm not looking to have any witnesses lose their jobs, end quote. So that is because obviously some people came forward and they're not giving their names. The assumption being that two of those main people are Gal Gadot and Jason Momoa, who are concerned about job security. Now, we might not think that they need to be concerned about job security, but this is a really tough industry, and it makes sense that they actually feel that way after all of this. So he can't really tell full stories still to the extent that he wants to about everybody, because he's protecting some people, which makes a lot of sense. One of the people interviewed in the article, and this is the place that we'll start, is Chris Terrio. And this is what they said that Chris Terrio said to Hollywood Reporter. Quote, Zach and I always considered Cyborg's story to be the heart of the movie. He is the most pronounced character arc of any of the heroes, the beginning from a place of despair and ending with a feeling that he is whole and that he is loved. Terrio says he and Snyder took the portrayal of the first Black superhero in the DC film universe very seriously, adding, quote, with a white writer and white director, we both thought having the perspective of an actor of color was really important, and Ray is really good with story and character, so he became a creative partner in creating Victor. End quote. Victor obviously being Victor Stone, who is Cyborg. So what they start doing in this article is painting this picture of what it was like prior to Joss Whedon entering this project. Clearly, we're hearing from Chris Terrio that Zack Snyder and Chris Terrio, who were acknowledging that they are white, that they are creating a character for the first time in the big screen. That is, and this is before Black Panther even comes out. It's a huge deal that we have Cyborg coming. And so they were talking to Ray Fisher in order to get the perspective of somebody who is Black about a Black character. So we start to see a little bit more about that unfold. After Fisher's reps were told that Whedon planned to make major revisions to the film, he flew from New Jersey to meet with the filmmaker in LA. When the two met at a bar, Fisher says Whedon, quote, was tiptoeing around the fact that everything was changing, end quote. As he left the meeting, Fisher was handed the revised script, which he read twice on the plane back. Gone was Cyborg's traumatic backstory, his relationship with his mother, whose loving scenes with her son were eliminated, as was the accident that killed her and led to his transformation. The material was later restored in the Snyder Cut, which we obviously saw. Quote, it represents that his parents are two genius-level Black people. We don't see that every day, end quote. That's Ray Fisher speaking himself. And I have to say it's a really good point that not often, and this is something that my Black friends are talking to me about all the time, and honestly, I can't even say that it was something that I necessarily would have noticed, which is why it's so important to educate yourself, that we only really see certain types of Black people on screen. You know, we see a lot of the Oscar-winning Black people on screen are often during slave movies or movies about slavery or about drug dealers, or, you know, there's a lot of the same type of character that we see. And with Cyborg's parents, it really gives us an opportunity to explore two genius level Black people. And you can't really tell me that you can name that many movies that are on the level of Justice League. You know, this is a massive franchise tentpole film that feature two Black parents who are both effing brilliant. So that's really an encouraging thing to see, and to see that get cut. I'm sure that was really upsetting to Ray Fisher, especially because it's not like it was never in there. And so he was just expecting it to be there. It was there, and then he lost that. So that's really challenging. And I'm glad they included that part in the story. Whedon sent out an email asking for questions, comments, or, quote, fulsome praise, end quote. But Fisher says it became clear, quote, all he was looking for was the fulsome praise, end quote. Trying to strike a jocular tone, jocular tone, however you pronounce that word, that is Jocular. Good job, Rox. Fisher responded with that he mourned the loss of the Cyborg material, but was moving on. He said he had notes to avoid issues in terms of representation of his character, but in a call with Whedon, Fisher said he barely stated to talk with the film when the filmmaker cut him off and said, quote, it feels like I'm taking notes right now, and I don't like taking notes from anybody, not even Robert Downey Jr., end quote. Other sources on the project say Whedon was similarly dismissive of Godot and Momoa when they tried to question some lines. So this is something we had heard. Jocular. Thank you, John Baybridge. This is something we had learned previously, that he had said this line about not even Robert Downey Jr. We had heard a little bit about this, but it's starting to make a bit more sense now that you have actors who are working with one director on a project, and they know where their character is, and they're working on this arc, and they've signed on to this specific script. And then we're pulling the rug out, and the director is saying questions, comments, concerns, praise, and the actors are saying, actually, we do have some questions. And he's like, whoa, I don't take notes from anybody. Now, there's a lot of directors in Hollywood that don't take notes from anybody. And that isn't necessarily a sexist, racist, prejudice issue. There's a lot of directors who won't take notes from anybody. That's just the truth. They think that they know best. They are the director. It's their job. And the only person they're going to take notes from is their boss, which is the studio. So that happens often. But when you are coming into a project, midway through the project, these characters have already been developed, and you're sending out an email asking for questions, comments, concerns, and then you've got some, and then you say you don't take notes from everybody. Then why did you fucking ask? Make it clear from jump. This is my script. This is what I'm doing. And also, it's a big, to me, filmmaking is a huge collaborative process. You want to hear people out. And I'm not saying that the director, there's such thing as too many cooks. I'm not saying the director should take everybody's words into make them law, but he should take them into consideration, especially if you want to do the best job and you're coming into a project. It just doesn't seem like the best way to make art. And clearly we saw that when Justice League didn't turn out the way that he was hoping it would. So that's a bummer. It's not rare, but it's a bummer. Fisher turned to Johns during this time, who he had said presented himself as a mentor. Now, we know that Ray Fisher has said that Geoff Johns is part of the problem. And we've been asking ourselves, how so? You've said that he is part of this, but we don't really know much more. And this paints a story that helps clarify what he's talking about. But I am curious how you guys feel about all of this. Don't forget to Streamlabs in and Super Chat in, by the way, guys. I am going to be looking at those and periodically pausing throughout the story to check in on what it is you guys are talking about. But Fisher turned to Johns, who had said that he was kind of a mentor. And apparently what John's response was, quote, "We can't make Joss mad." Johns is a publicist who was speaking to Hollywood Reporter. The publicist's name is Howard Bragman, who denied John saying that and said what John said was, quote, he recalls suggesting that any creative pitches should happen when Joss Whedon was not preoccupied, so he would be most receptive, end quote. Now, those are two different sides of the coin. I think that when you're a director, you're probably always preoccupied. I don't really know that there's a situation in which you're not preoccupied, especially when you're coming halfway through a movie, you're hitting the ground running. So not exactly sure what that suggestion is, but maybe he was trying to help. We don't know his true intentions there. It sounds a little strange to me that he would say, if you want to suggest things, suggest it to the director when they're not busy, because anybody who's in Geoff Johns' position would know that the director's always busy. The director's never not busy. So I don't really know what to make of that. Once Whedon got involved, Fisher says that Johns told him that it was problematic that Cyborg smiled only twice in movies. Fisher says he later learned from a witness who participated in the investigation that Johns and other top execs, including then DC Film co-chairman John Berg and Warner Studio chief Toby Emmerich, had discussions in which they said they could not have, quote, an angry black man, end quote, at the center of the film. John's rep responds that once the chairman of the studio mandated a brighter tone for the film, all further discussions centered on, quote, adding joy and hopefulness to all 6 superheroes. There are always conversations about avoiding any stereotype of race, gender, or sexuality, end quote. All right, so breaking this part down, clearly John's rep did not say they didn't say that. And Ray Fisher's saying they did say that. So I think we have to go with the assumption that somebody in that room said that they wanted to avoid the stereotype of an angry black man. I was talking to my friend about this last night after we did our show. And that was actually something that had come up on this show. Just to be clear, there is no such thing as an angry black man. I don't mean that no men who are black ever get angry, but what the fuck is an angry black man? There's an angry person. There's a person who's black. There are people who are men, but what the fuck is an angry black man? Like that's not a thing. And we have to stop making that a thing before it's not a thing. There's no What is an angry black man? That is a ridiculous thing to say. So for people to be like, well, we want to avoid having an angry black man, if he's a man who happens, if he's a person who happens to be a man, who happens to be black, and his parents have been killed, and nobody's listening to him, and he's had all of his body parts stripped from him, and he is now a robot, I have to assume he's gonna be angry. I would be. Am I an angry Jew girl? Because I'm pretty sure nobody in the room is like, we want to avoid having an angry Jew girl. Because that doesn't make any fucking sense. Everybody feels a whole gamut of emotions. So that doesn't make any sense. Which is just, that's just, if you understand storytelling, you understand that that's his story. So that's frustrating. Also, I don't know many cyborgs, many robots, half human, half robot, who go around smiling a ton. It doesn't make sense. So if somebody said that in the room, I'm not saying they said it with ill intent. I am saying they need to get educated. And that person should say, I said this. This is the way I was thinking. And I was wrong. I was wrong. Thank you for letting me know that that is not a thing. And everybody can feel all emotions. So we appreciate you letting us know that that was the wrong way of thinking. And that's why you need people of color in these rooms. Because when you tell me that you're having a room with John Berg and Toby Emmerich and Jeff Johns, and I think those are the people and Whedon, you don't have a black person in the room to be like, huh? You want them to smile more? Which, by the way, you guys know is a thing for me. You know, smile more is a fucking thing for me. But you need somebody in the room to be like, that doesn't make sense. And it sounds like Ray Fisher was volunteering to be in the room saying, I'll help so that we can avoid these things. And they just weren't letting him in the room. So that's incredibly frustrating. And you can feel the tension and the frustration building for sure. Johns told Fisher he should play the character less like Frankenstein and more like kind-hearted Quasimodo. Fisher says that in order to demonstrate the look he wanted, Johns dipped his shoulder in what struck Fisher as a servile posture. To Fisher, there was a big difference between portraying a character who was born with a disability versus one who had been transformed by trauma, and he felt Cyborg was a kind of modern-day Frankenstein. Quote, I didn't have any intention of playing him as a jovial, cathedral-cleaning individual, end quote. I've read and seen a lot of iterations of Cyborg, and never have I thought, you know what's a good guideline for Cyborg? Quasimodo. I don't see it. Now, here's what I'll say about Jeff Johns. However we come out of this article or however we feel about him as an exec, Jeff Johns knows comic books. He knows Cyborg. He knows the character. And for him to suggest that Cyborg's kind of Quasimodo-like, that's shocking. That would be shocking to me. Because, what? I don't see that. John's representative responded and said, Jeff gave a note using a fictional character as an example of a sympathetic man who is unhappy and has an inclination to hide from the world, but one whom the audience roots for because he has a courageous heart. It is very possible that Jeff Johns did not mean that this was a person who was born handy capable, who had a hunch, and he was really trying to just talk about the heart of the character. It's also possible that Jeff Johns is getting notes from people being like, we need this, and he is the messenger. But all of that being said, I'm just surprised to hear that Jeff Johns would use Quasimodo as an example here. And to do the hunch of the shoulder, I don't see it. Now, a sympathetic person who's unhappy, that makes sense. But that doesn't relate to what Ray's saying, because if you're unhappy, usually you're not smiling. So all of this seems to be a little lost in translation. At the very least, the communication in this room clearly was not there, because whatever Geoff Johns was trying to say, Ray Fisher walked away with something definitely different, or at least what Geoff Johns is claiming he was trying to say. So where Geoff Johns is zigging, Ray Fisher is zagging, and when you have an actor who doesn't know what they're being told to do, or even what's being asked of them, that's a huge problem. That's a huge communication issue. And Geoff Johns, we know from a lot of people, have stood up for him and said he's a great communicator. This doesn't sound like that to me. It doesn't sound like somebody who's a clear communicator. Let's see what you guys are talking about. Streamlabs.com/Roxy Stryer and in the super chat as well. All right, let's go in here and see the situation. Randy, you're fine. It's Brandy, but fine. In the Streamlabs says, WB mandated a 2-hour movie. Every actor had their characters reduced and compromised. Ray casually throwing around racist claims without any evidence of racist acts other than hearsay is a dangerous thing. Randy, I would argue that this article is not hearsay. So, and with the publicist, with the spokesperson speaking on behalf of Warner Brothers and on behalf of Geoff Johns, I would argue a lot of this is not hearsay, that he does have evidence. So I am with you, Randy, in the fact that a lot of characters were compromised. I agree that not every situation around this had to do with race, but clearly there is part of this that does have to do with race. And that's what we're trying to kind of distinguish here. And there's certainly evidence, and I don't know how after reading this article, if you read it, you could think otherwise. Weston Ira in the streamlabs.com/Roxy Stryer says, amen about the angry black man stuff. Never makes sense to me. Even as a black dude myself, the more info comes out, the more I see why Ray hasn't just folded under the pressure. Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I feel that, Weston. It's just, I think he really, really believes in this cause because he went through it, and he's like, no, you guys are not fucking listening. No one's fucking listening to me, and I'm going to make you guys listen. And I'm not saying I 1000%, I do stand with Ray Fisher, but that doesn't mean that I am sitting here trashing on Geoff Johns. I'm really trying to listen to the words. And I think what's very clear to me is that Joss Whedon is a no-fly zone. What Joss Whedon did is a no-go. And then for the rest of it, I'm trying to really make heads or tails and really listen to who said what and what they're doing. And Geoff Johns is being stood up for by a lot of people right now. And is that to protect him? Or is that because a lot of people really believe this about him? Obviously, Ray Fisher's experience with him was not the same. But I'm really trying to listen and make heads or tails and give you guys my honest opinion on this article. Not trying, not for any reason other than we're breaking it down together as we're hearing this information for the first time. Okay. Fisher told Johns it might be one thing for a non-black person to write a character for a comic, but it was another for a black actor to portray that character on screen. Quote, it was like he was assuming how black people would respond rather than taking the advice from the only black person, as far as I know, with any kind of creative impact on the project, end quote. That's always going to be a problem. That's always going to be a problem when there's no person in the creative process who is black and you're working with black characters. It's going to be an issue. I don't know a case in which that it's not going to lend itself to some issues. So that Fisher says Johns did not yield. Quote, that was the last creative conversation about anything that Geoff Johns and I had. I knew I was on my own. End quote. Fisher said, that's what Fisher said. Johns' rep denies that he ever dismissed any comments, adding that Fisher knew Johns, whose spokesperson requested that he be identified as Lebanese American, quote, had evolved traditionally all white DC properties like Shazam, Justice Society of America, and others into diverse groups of heroes, end quote, in his extensive work as a comic book author. That is part of the reason why the Geoff Johns stuff is sticking for a lot of people, because Geoff Johns has done a lot to bring diversity to the page and to the screen, and there can be multiple truths at once here. So we're going to talk about later on in this article is some of Geoff Johns' family life and other things that kind of come into question here. And I will just remind people that multiple things can be true at once. You can be helpful in some areas and not helpful in other areas, because some people are not, all of us are not perfect people. And so so that is what we're talking about here. Okay. Justice League producer Charles Roven, a veteran on DC superhero films dating back to Batman Begins in 2005, says, quote, I fully empathize with Ray that his character arc was significantly altered. Empathize. I fully empathize with Ray that his character arc was significantly altered and shortened. I've also collaborated with Geoff over many years and found him to be a gracious and humble man. Geoff took it upon himself to put Cyborg in Justice League comics in the first place and has written more about the character than any other individual except for the creator. He loves the character Cyborg, end quote. I don't think that there's any doubt in my mind that he does love the character. I think Geoff Johns probably really loves Cyborg. That doesn't mean that Ray Fisher feels like he felt protected by Geoff Johns, because he clearly didn't. So again, both those things can totally be true. Stephen Sommers says, Joss and John's past good behavior is not an excuse for present bad behavior. I've super duper not said that. And if that's what you're hearing, I don't know where you're hearing that. What I'm saying is multiple things can be true at once. And that's all I'm saying, that there can be multiple things that are true. All these tensions were playing out during extremely stressful time at studio. This talks a little bit about the financial issues and the acquisitions that were going on, which we're going to skip over that. But that tension only escalated when the issue of having Cyborg say booyah arose. So this is something that we had heard a little bit about as well. We had heard about the booyah debacle. And this is what we'll talk about now. That phrase had become a signature of the character thanks to the animated Teen Titans show, but the character had never said it in the comics or the original script, since the character has said it in the comics, I believe, but maybe they mean OG comics. Fisher said that Johns had approached Snyder about including the line, but the director didn't want any catchphrases. He managed the situation by putting the word on some signs in his version of the film as an Easter egg, but John's rep says the entire studio believed the booyah line was a fun moment of synergy. This we hear all of the time in movies, where the studio wants something that an actor and a director might not want. So the people who need to be worried about making the money versus the creative team are at odds. That's something we hear all the time in the industry. Fisher says he doesn't see the word in itself as an issue, and this part was really interesting. But he thought it played differently in a live action film than the animated series, and he thought of Black characters in pop culture with defining phrases. Gary Coleman's, "What you talking about, Willis?" Jimmy Walker's, "Dynamite." As no one else in the film had a catchphrase, he says, quote, "It seemed weird to have the only Black character say that," end quote. I've never heard him say that before, and I get where he's coming from. I think that a lot of people just would think that him saying booyah is a nice little homage and just is a good moment? Yes. Do I think it would have made the movie any more or less money? No. Do I think it might have sold more action figures or anything along those lines? Possibly, but it didn't. So I really hear him when he says that he would be the only character with a catchphrase. And, you know, with Gary Coleman, "What you talking about, Willis?" that ended up being like the thing and the one thing remembered. And so I get his hesitation here, and I think it definitely deserved to at least be looked into more. And I think it's valid. Now, do I understand the studio wanting a catchphrase in something? Yeah, I get that as well. With reshoots underway, Fisher says Whedon raised the issue again. Quote, "Geoff tells me Cyborg has a catchphrase," end quote. He told him, Fisher says, he expressed his objections, and it seemed the matter was dropped until Berg, the co-chair DC and a producer of the project, took him to dinner. Now, this felt really not cute. Quote, This is one of the most expensive movies Warner's has ever made, end quote, Berg said, according to Fisher. Quote, what if the CEO of AT&T has a son or daughter, and that son or daughter wants Cyborg to say booyah in the movie, and we don't have a take of that? I could lose my job, end quote. Fisher responded that he knew if he filmed the line, it would end up in the movie, and he expressed skepticism that the film's fate rested on Cyborg saying booyah. But he shot the take. As he arrived on set, he says Whedon stretched out his arms and said a line from Hamlet in a mocking tone. Speak the speech I pray you as I pronounced it to you. End quote. Fisher replied, quote, Joss, don't. I'm not in the mood. End quote. As he left the set after saying just that one phrase for the cameras, he says Whedon called out, quote, nice work, Ray. End quote. Ugh. This just is not. It's not a cute look. For Berg to take him to dinner and be like, I could lose my job if you don't say this. That's a lot of pressure. And also the example of the AT&T person's son or daughter, it shouldn't be about that person. That doesn't make any sense. If you want to make an argument, it should be about what the fans really want, and what little black boys and girls around the world would want, and I'm not saying that they would want booyah. I'm just saying that's what the argument might be if you're trying to talk to him, not this person's kid that is a boss here. And then the actual moment on set sounds disgusting. And when you're in a mood, but you have a job to do and you have to do that job and somebody's kind of taunting you, that Joss Whedon thing is like, blech. Him speaking in Hamlet, just fucking gross. Fucking gross. Hated that part of the article. Even before the line was shot, Fisher's agent had called Warner Studio chief Emmerich, who we talked about earlier, to raise concerns about what was happening on set after Fisher arrived in Los Angeles for additional photography in summer of 2017. Johns asked him to come to the DC offices in Burbank. When they met in the conference room, Fisher said he apologized to Whedon for his part in the conflict, which he had done in the hope of preventing a real rupture with the DC team. Johns responded that having agents call Emmerich was, quote, just not cool, end quote. Fisher recalls, quote, he said, I consider us to be friends, which he knew we were not, and I just don't want you to make a bad name for yourself in the business, end quote. Fisher took that as a threat, which I understand why he would take it as a threat, because making a bad name for yourself in the business, especially when you're Fisher and you're coming up and you don't have a lot of credits, as opposed to Geoff Johns, who is a huge powerhouse, that's a big deal. Fisher took that as a threat, and Johns reps say he never made a threat, but told Fisher that creative differences were not normally taken to the head of a film studio by an actor's agent. I mean, Geoff Johns is right. Geoff Johns is right that is true, that reps usually don't get to talk to the studio head about something. Your agent, that's not typically done. And also, he is also correct in the fact that if it's not a threat, if it's just a fact, then it is a fact. The fact is that Ray Fisher might make a bad name for himself in the industry. Now, should it be said like that? No. And should it even be said at all? I don't know. And I'm sure that Ray Fisher already was aware of that pulling any kind of, anything but just yes, boss, no boss can give you a bad name. So Geoff Johns is not wrong that it can give you a bad name, but the way he said it, I think could use a lot of work. Fisher was not the only Justice League star who was unhappy. Sources say Whedon clashed with all the stars of the film, including Jeremy Irons. And one Justice League star ended up taking her complaints not only to the head of the film studio, but also the chairman of Warner Brothers. A knowledgeable source says that Godot had multiple concerns with the revised version of the film, including issues with her character being more aggressive than her character in Wonder Woman. She wanted to make the character flow from one movie to the next. Again, that's something that happens in scripts all the time, where you have an issue with how you're doing in a sequel. And I'm not saying that Gal is not wrong to voice those, but it is the director and the writer's job and the studio's, it's their prerogative to disagree with some of those things. A knowledgeable source says Godot and Jenkins went to battle, culminating in a meeting with Kevin Tsujihara, who we know is not there now. Asked for comment, Godot says in a statement, I had my issues with Whedon, and Warner Brothers handled it in a timely manner. So that's kind of, I think, Gal's way of her and Patty seemingly really stood up for the character. And I guess Warner Brothers, Gal's claiming Warner Brothers handled it. I don't know what that means or looks like, but that's all she wants to give us at this time. 3 months after Justice League hit theaters, Whedon exited Batgirl, which we've talked about also. And then recently he ended up exiting the TV show he was on. And it looks like Warner Brothers is no longer going to be doing any work with him. Plus the fact that Justice League didn't even do well, at least not compared to how well they thought that it was going to be doing. So that was all part of this as well. After Justice League, Fisher went to play, we know, in True Detective, which he said was a great experience. But in the coming months, he would hear fresh reports of what had gone on behind the scenes on Justice League, including the Angry Black Man conversation and other allegations, including Johns. 2 individuals who has worked on Sci-Fi's Krypton TV series talked to Fisher about events that had taken place on the series. Multiple sources tell THR that the show's creators were passionate about doing some non-traditional casting, with Regé-Jean Page, who we know from Bridgerton, had auditioned for the role of Superman's grandfather, but Johns, who was overseeing the project, said Superman could not have a black grandfather. The creators also wanted to make one superhero character, Adam Strange, gay or bisexual, but sources say John vetoed the idea. Now, these are all sources that are not being named, so it's hard to know what exactly is going on here. But that being said, we've talked about this several times on the show. There is no world in which Superman's grandfather cannot be black. There's no world in which Superman cannot be black. He is an alien. He's from a different planet. There's just no world in which they don't even play by our rules. Why are the Kryptonians all white? It doesn't make sense. So I think that I in my soul, I feel like in Geoff Johns' soul, he knows that. So if he said that, I have no idea why he would say that. And then in terms of Adam Strange being a gay or bisexual character, I don't know a world in which that wouldn't be okay either. So it's very strange. And I know we're in the middle of this, but I have to just make sure my Postmates leaves my food here. Hold for Postmates. Hello? Could you just leave it at the front door, please? Thank you so much. Guys, this is the real world, and this is working from home, and this is how it goes. So getting back into this, the quote is Geoff Johns. This is from his representative, Geoff Johns' representatives. Quote, Geoff celebrates and supports LGBTQ characters, including Batwoman, who in 2006 was reintroduced as LGBTQ in a comic book series co-written by Johns. This is what Johns' rep said in an email. Johns was also pitched Warner's on developing a television show around the first LGBTQ lead DC superhero television series. He adds, as for the role of Superman's grandfather, the rep says Johns believed fans expected the character to look like a young Henry Cavill. I don't know why that would be the case, but I don't know why that would be the case. Several sources who spoke to Fisher around this time were willing to talk to a Warner's investigator. Among them was writer Nadria Tucker, who tweeted on February 24th, quote, I haven't spoken to Geoff Johns since the day on Krypton when he tried to tell me what is or is not a black thing, end quote. Tucker tells THR that Johns objected when a black female character's hairstyle was changed in scenes and took place on different days. Quote, I said, black women, we tend to change our hair frequently. It's not weird. It's a black thing. And he said, no, it's not, end quote. John's spokesperson says, quote, what were standard continuity notes for a scene are being spun in a way that are not only personally offensive to Geoff, but to the people that know who he is, know the work he's done, and know the life he lives, as Geoff has personally seen firsthand the painful effects of racial stereotypes concerning hair and other cultural stereotypes, having been married to a black woman who he was with for a decade, and with his second wife, who is Asian American, as well as his son, who is mixed race, end quote. So, like I talked about earlier in this, multiple things can be true at once. Geoff Johns married a black woman and then married an Asian woman and has a mixed kid. Those are facts. Geoff, I'm sure, loved those people and wanted to treat them with all of the respect and love in the world, and probably has a different kind of understanding of those communities than white men who do not marry people in those communities. Does that mean he knows everything? No. Is it true that continuity-wise, often you don't have people change their hair in scenes? Yes. But if he said it's not a black thing to change your hair, then that doesn't make sense. If he had responded and said, I don't think, I don't actually know even how he could have phrased it, but if he was saying it goes against the continuity in this scene to in the next scene have her hair be different because there's not that much time in between the two scenes, that happens 5 minutes later or whatever, that's one thing. But to say it's not a black thing as a white man to a black woman, I don't know why he would I don't know why he would say that. That sounds not legitimate. And so, like I talk about with multiple truths, I'm not sitting here saying that Geoff Johns is a racist. I haven't said that once. I don't even know that Ray Fisher has said that. I doubt it. But is there some racism in those words? What is it that somebody taught me the other day? Racist actions as opposed to being a racist? Is him telling a black woman that it's not a black thing to change your hair? Is that racially sensitive? No, it's racially insensitive. That is a racially insensitive moment. That's how to say it. And as a white person, I am sure I have had several racially insensitive moments in my life. I'm learning and I'm growing and I'm changing and I'm being the best me that I can be. And so I hope that Geoff Johns does the exact same thing, not standing up for him at all. I think that that's not right. I hope that he looks at that and realizes that that's a racially insensitive thing to do. And, if I do something racially insensitive ever, I'm not going to sit there and say, but I used to date a black guy, or I have a black friend, whatever the fucking tropes are that people say to try to make themselves seem not a certain way. Geoff Johns kind of just pulled that, but I was married to a black woman, and that is true that you were, but that doesn't mean that what you just said was racially sensitive, because it was racially insensitive. So that's not great. By late June 2020, Fisher went public with his dissatisfaction, I guess that's one word, at what he viewed at Warner's inaction. For their part, Warner's source contend that Fisher was being manipulated by Snyder, who hoped to reclaim control of the DC film universe. I mean, Snyder would have to be a mastermind manipulator in order for that to be the truth. And everybody who's worked with Snyder has said good things about him. Every single person. So that doesn't seem possible that he manipulated him into making this up. What? That just doesn't make sense. Let me know what you guys are thinking. We're going to continue through this, but streamlabs.com/Roxy Striar. I told you guys we were going to center all on this today because there's a lot to break down, and I appreciate Ray Fisher doing this very lengthy interview. Okay. Let's see. Adrian Bailey in here says, hey, Roxy, I grew up with Buffy and Angel. There's no doubt about it. Joss Whedon is a TV genius, but to treat his cast like trash and to behave like a fucking dick, forgive my swearing, LOL, is not right. I've lost a lot of respect for him. I stand by Ray. Yeah, absolutely. You can love somebody's art. I think American Beauty is an incredible movie and Kevin Spacey is a ridiculously talented actor, but do I have to... Do I like him? No. And do I have no respect for him? Yeah. And the same thing with Joss Whedon in terms of Buffy and Angel. I'm a huge Buffy fan and I feel you on this, but if he's a dick, he's a dick. Paul 3JP in the Streamlab says, yo, how's your Tuesday going? It's a beautiful day today. Side note, did you catch the trailer for Mainstream? Looks damn good. Side note, you're glowing today, fam. You getting some sun or what? Thanks, Apollo. I didn't catch that trailer. I am trying to get 15 minutes of sun a day. I've got a rooftop, so I've been trying to sit on there because I'm tired of not having the vitamin D, and I've been really going through the ringer. I know that that's tough to say as I'm talking about this conversation on the show today, but that is what's going on. Let me know what you guys are thinking. 200 of you guys in here right now, and I really appreciate that. Don't forget to thumbs up this video, like, subscribe, tell your friends that we exist, and streamlabs.com/Roxy Striar. Let me know what your thoughts are on this Ray Fisher article and his interview as we continue this. Okay. Fisher says that, quote, the assertion that a black man would not have his own agency is just as racist as the conversations Warner's leadership was having about the Justice League reshoots. I've been underestimated at every turn during this process, and that is what's led us to this point. Had they taken me as seriously as they should have from the beginning, they would not have made as many foolish mistakes as they did in the process, end quote. Snyder denies any role in influencing Fisher. I think this is a very valuable takeaway from this, in that when Fisher is saying they didn't take him seriously, they didn't. They made him feel like, as a black man, his opinion on black people didn't matter, and on black characters didn't matter. They didn't take him seriously. They didn't think that he was going to do anything about this. They thought that this would never see the light of day and that he would just shut the fuck up. And guess what? He didn't. He didn't. And is this the most egregious thing that's ever happened on a set in Hollywood? Absolutely not. You know, as we know, people are being sexually assaulted on sets left and right. And hopefully that's coming. That's the time of sexual assault and Me Too is coming to an end. But I'm just saying, is this the most egregious thing that's ever happened on a set? No. But is it wrong? Yes. And did they really clearly think that nothing was going to happen because of it? Yes. And they didn't take him seriously. And so they made him feel small and like he didn't matter, and that his thoughts didn't matter, and that his experiences didn't matter, and that him being black didn't matter. And it does. It all matters. And when you treat people like shit, then you're not doing your job to create beautiful art. It's frustrating, and I feel for him. Tweeting footage of himself praising Whedon at Comic-Con. We know that then he said, I'd like to take a moment to forcefully retract every bit of the statement, which he then said that it was gross, abusive, and unprofessional and completely unacceptable, and that he was enabled, and that Joss Whedon was enabled in many ways by Geoff Johns and John Berg. Berg told Variety that it was, quote, categorically untrue that we enabled any unprofessional behavior. He added that Fisher was upset by the Booyah thing, which we've already talked about. As Fisher continued to air grievances on social media and in some interviews, he began to suspect that when he tweeted, the studio would put out an announcement to detract from his message. On July 1st, the day that Fisher tweeted about Whedon's behavior, Deadline published an exclusive saying Warner's was making a live-action Frosty the Snowman movie with Aquaman starring Jason Momoa voicing the iconic snowman. If you guys remember, I even talked about that here on this show. A few weeks later, Momoa pushed back in an Instagram post and said, quote, I just think it's fucked up that people released a fake Frosty announcement without my permission to try to distract from Ray Fisher speaking up about the shitty way we were treated on Justice League's reshoots. Serious stuff went down. It needs to be investigated, and people need to be held accountable, end quote. Warner says the untitled Snowman comedy remains in development. If that's a fucking made-up thing that has nothing to do with Momoa, mind blown. Then that is nuts. Because we were all speculating, oh, clearly Momoa is okay with, or a lot of us were speculating, Momoa must be cool with Warner Brothers. If they just made that shit up, oh my God. Savage. I mean, that is savage. In early July, Fisher spoke with Walter Hamada, who had taken the reins at DC Films. He says Hamada, quote, called Joss an asshole and said, I'm just looking to get past anything to do with Justice League. Joss isn't here anymore, and I don't plan on hiring him again, end quote. But according to Fisher, Hamada said he did not believe Johns had done anything wrong. Quote, I don't know John Berg very well. I know Joss was difficult, but Jeff, Ray, he's really getting dragged through the mud, and I'm sure you're getting your share of hate too. I'm fine with your share of hate too. And then Fisher responded and said, I'm fine with the hate because I know I'm telling the truth. He asked for an investigation. We know that he had asked for the investigation. This is what we had been talking about on this show for so long. I will say a lot of people standing up, people who are not standing up for John Berg, who are not standing up for Joss Whedon, several people seemingly continue to stand up for Geoff Johns. And that is worth noting. That doesn't mean that Geoff Johns has pitched a perfect game, but it does mean he's made some allies along the way. And we just continue to see that in this article. Later that month, the studio's HR department contacted Fisher. He says he spoke with 2 executives for about 2 hours. He adds that he offered specific allegations of abusive behavior towards himself and others and provided the names of some witnesses willing to be contacted. but he was wary, cognizant that the HR departments are often known to show more allegiance to employers than to complaining parties. He became even more suspicious. He says when witnesses started telling him they had not been contacted, Fisher requested an independent investigator and asked SAG-AFTRA to help to have a rep with him in the process. So imagine giving the names and then hearing those names had not been contacted. That seems like a weird cover-up move. How can you deny that? It kind of seems like that. When in mid-August, Warner's exec told Fisher that an outside investigator had been approved, but his guard went up when the exec said, "We really like him. We've worked with him before." Still, Fisher tweeted out that this represented a massive step forward. So it's kind of like the lesser of the evils. Do we work with an internal person or an external person that we worked with before that they already like, that obviously it's still not great? And who's paying for the investigation? Obviously, these things can't fully be trusted. And that's a really shitty part of our industry that we have not fucking figured out how to navigate yet. When Warner's veteran told Fisher not to trust the investigation if a particular studio exec was overseeing it because that person had previously helped sweep misconduct under the rug. When he spoke to the investigator, Fisher asked how many times he had worked for the studio. He declined to answer. Fisher asked who was overseeing the inquiry and said he would have an issue if it was the executive named by his contact. He still got no answer. Feeling the situation felt pretty dodgy, Fisher went no further. On August 26th, the investigator provided a name citing an attorney in the general counsel's office. When Fisher looked at the Warner Media website, he found this individual was the only Black attorney whose headshot was visible. This is talk about sus. And in fact, that lawyer had nothing to do with the investigation. She handled matters for HBO, HBO Max, TBS, and TNT. Fisher wondered if naming her had been a simple mistake or a ploy to lull him, quote, into a sense of security with the idea that she might be on the same team as me simply by way of her being a Black person, end quote. Feeling more disrespectful, Fisher continued to tweet, writing on September 4th that Hamada had thrown Whedon and Berg under the bus while covering for Johns. Quote, unfortunately, it's not until I start talking about people specifically that the needle starts to move. If they are going to continue to try to cover things up, I wasn't going to let that happen. Fisher then got a call from John Berg, who said he was sorry that the actor had an appalling experience on Justice League and hadn't been able to help, acknowledging that a bunch of straight white men had been running things. He said he hoped the studio would improve in the future. Berg said he had spoken to the investigator at length and truthfully, quote, I let him know that it did mean a lot, end quote. Fisher says, quote, I'm not beyond forgiveness when it comes to this kind of thing. It was a very big thing for him to do. No one else in the process has reached out at all. What? Mind blowing. You are telling me that in this process, the only person that's reached out to Ray Fisher is John Berg. And John Berg, sounds like John Berg gave at least a brief apology and that Ray Fisher was receptive to that. What? What the This was the moment that I stopped to be like, wait a second. None of you guys have reached out, and maybe this is a legal issue, but none of you guys have reached out to be like, can we talk about this? What's going on? And from what I'm hearing, this and this, and I'm so sorry about that. With Ray Fisher being willing to, and I know that puts the studio in a bad position because then they could be liable. So there could be a lot of legal things going on here. But the fact that nobody's reached out to him except for the one person who did, and he's receptive to that apology. Oh my God, it's mind blowing how much legal shit can get in the way of some stuff. It's very, very frustrating here. Let's go into the Streamlabs, streamlabs.com/Roxy Striar to see what it is that you guys have to say. Thank you for continuing to have this conversation with me. I appreciate you all. Weston Ira says, Joss sounds like Vince McMahon to me. They both have histories of pushing/de-pushing diversity. It's like they flip-flop between both of those sides. For some reason, playing both sides. I guess also glad to be getting my World merch this week. That's awesome that you're getting merch. I'm happy to hear that. I don't know about him being like Vince McMahon, because isn't Vince McMahon extremely Republican too? But, I hear the comparison, and yeah, I hear you. You guys let me know what it is that you are thinking. Super chat, Streamlabs, all of that. So The studio, meanwhile, defended itself that day in a statement, quote, "At no time did Mr. Hamada ever throw anyone under the bus, as Mr. Fisher has falsely claimed, or rendered any judgments about the Justice League production in which Mr. Hamada had no involvement," end quote. The company said Fisher had refused multiple attempts by the investigator to contact him. Fisher saw that as a smear, which I understand why he saw that way, because Fisher was being responsive and receptive and was trying to get through this with them. In October, top Warner Media execs spoke with Fisher and his team, including a rep from SAG-AFTRA. Fisher's reps confirmed the content of the call. When Fisher pressed the questions of how the investigator had come to provide the name of an in-house attorney who had nothing to do with the inquiry, a Warner Media executive on the call responded that the investigator had, quote, "just pulled the name off the internet," end quote. So that was a ploy to be like, look, there's somebody black. There's somebody black. Maybe they'll have your back. We just want you to know that somebody black is involved with the investigation. And that person was not even involved with the investigation. So they pulled it off the internet. What the fuck? Christy Hebegger, head of communications at Warner Media and the company's top inclusion officer, said the studio's statement that Fisher had refused to cooperate with the investigation had been based on third-hand information. The studio's communications department had been responding emotionally to Fisher's public allegations against Hamada. She said, adding, quote, "I think they believed what they were saying was true," end quote. Oh boy. Fisher wondered why anyone at the studio, which was ostensibly the subject of investigation, would comment at all. Great question, right, Fisher? Pressed by Fisher, Hebegger, or however you say her name, declined to say who at the studio had approved the statement, but she said she was, quote, "furious" when she read it. Quote, "I have made it 100% crystal clear to everyone, the entire Warner Brothers Communications organization, that not a goddamn word can be said about Ray Fisher. If I catch anyone doing that, they're fired," end quote. I mean, I'm sure she was furious, because what a fucking shitstorm that is, to claim that he wouldn't talk to the investigators when clearly that wasn't what happened, and they fucking are saying that to the public. I mean, she must have thrown a shit fit, because as somebody who used to handle that for a company, everybody shut the fuck up, because she's trying to protect this company right now and every party involved. After the studio put out the statement accusing him of not cooperating, what Fisher calls the hit piece, which makes sense, he asked for another investigator. Warner Media agreed to bring in Forrest, who they told had handled the investigation of ousted CEO Sujihara. Fisher was initially optimistic, but says he again turned weary when Forrest, who is white, led with the fact that she was an Obama appointee. And I'd vote for Obama a third time if I could. Still, Fisher was somewhat optimistic because he believed Forrest's previous Sujihara investigation had exposed alleged misconduct, but she told him that she hadn't completed that inquiry before Sujihara left. Instead, he left after THR published an article about his entanglement with the actress Charlotte Kirk, which we've talked about on this show before. Initially, Fisher was told Forrest would work alongside the original investigator. He objected, and the original investigator withdrew. At least there's that. Let's continue down this path, pausing to take this dancing dog 60, who says, "Just want to say you rock, Roxy. Thank you. I appreciate you." Ryan Payne just says, I know. There's just so much. There's so much to this. And I feel like this is barely scratching the surface. But yes, thank you for everybody who's joining. Again, if you have thoughts, feelings, concerns, questions on this, streamlabs.com/Roxy Striars. We continue to break down this article, which just paints a picture for us of a situation that is just fucking icky. In December, Fisher says that he and his SAG-AFTRA rep had a final conversation with Forrest, during which he said remedial action had been taken, some of which she said Fisher had probably seen, but she was not explicit. She said further remedial action would be taken, but again did not offer specifics. But she told Fisher she did not find evidence of racial animus. Warner Brothers chairman Ann Sarnoff said in a recent interview that the investigator found the cuts made in the Joss Whedon version of Justice League were not racially motivated, but Forrest didn't say that publicly. To Fisher, the information Forrest shared was so limited that it seemed the purpose was clear. She was only authorized by Warner Media to attempt to explain away anything to do with race. Warner's maintains it has complete confidence in the investigation process and her conclusions. On the evening of December 11th, Warner's issued a statement saying the investigation was finished in what Fisher calls a Friday night news dump. Witnesses contacted him asking what had happened, but he had no answers. A week later, he pressed Hayberger and other execs for more information. They asked him to provide names of anyone who had told him they hadn't gotten closure. Fisher said he would not provide witnesses because, again, he's trying to protect his friends and the people who need to continue working to feed their families. In February, he tweeted that Hamada was the most dangerous kind of enabler who had shown that he would blindly cover for his colleagues and had worked with the studio to destroy a black man's credibility and publicly delegitimize a very serious investigation with lies in the press. Fisher says he was referring to the September statement that Fisher had refused to cooperate with the investigation, which he feels Hamada must have known about in advance. He would know the inner workings of that better, but oh boy. The company responded with a statement from Forrest saying Hamada was credible and forthcoming and did nothing that impeded or interfered with the company's investigation. Fisher believes this missed the bigger picture. While he accused Hamada of undermining and tampering with the investigation in a series of tweets, he says these were specifically in reference to the conversation he had with Hamada, in which the executive tried to dissuade Fisher from pursuing his grievances against Johns. Fisher does not, he says, believe that Hamada otherwise actively tried to interfere with the investigation. Sources at the studio, however, point to Fisher's tweets as evidence of shifting grudges and a lack of credibility. So again, similar to, with Joss Whedon, ew, gross all around. With Geoff Johns, there are a few different truths that are going on, and some of them just really are hard pills to swallow. With Hamada, it sounds like what Fisher is saying, that he didn't do everything he could to stop the investigation, but he also didn't do what he could to protect Fisher. And so that sucks too. And is common, but yeah. Before things had gone sour, Fisher was expected to play a supporting role as Cyborg in the planned The Flash movie. We had talked about Cyborg's role in The Flash was probably going to be a relatively big role. In June 2020, Fisher says he had a call with Andy Muschietti, which is the director of the Flash movie, that seemed positive, but the discussion hit a snag when Warner's framed a 2-week shoot as a cameo, offering only a fraction of what Fisher says he should have been paid for reappearing as Cyborg. By late September, he was upset by press reports that he was demanding to double his pay. This sucks. The fact that Ray Fisher is coming for a 2-week shoot, and they're calling that a cameo. 1 day on set, it's a cameo. 2 days on set, maybe even could be a cameo. But you're telling me he's there for 2 weeks, and you guys are calling that a cameo so you can pay him less? Especially after he was already Cyborg. He was already popular. People already loved him in the role. All of this shit was already fucking going down. And then this 2020 phone call is saying he's going to be paid a fraction. It feels like they pushed him out the fucking door. What was he supposed to say? Just roll over and take it? Ultimately, the studio removed the Cyborg role from the movie. Citing a December 30 tweet, the studio said, quote, given his statement that Mr. Fisher will not participate in any film associated with Mr. Hamada, our production is now moving on. Ugh. Fisher says he wasn't surprised. Quote, when I first spoke up, I assumed there was no way these guys would allow me to do my job in peace, end quote. He says, now working on the ABC anthology series, Women of the Movement, Fisher says he knew the struggle could be costly. Quote, I'm not so indebted to Hollywood that I haven't been willing to put myself out there, end quote. Quote, I don't believe some of these people are fit for positions of leadership, end quote, says Fisher, who explains he's not looking for anyone to be fired. Quote, I don't want them excommunicated from Hollywood, but I don't think they should be in charge of the hiring and firing of other people. End quote. Fisher knows he's not going to win that battle, but he feels a point has to be made. Quote, if I can't get accountability, at least I can make people aware of who they're dealing with, end quote. I certainly think this article did that. I think that him saying that he wanted people to be aware of who they're dealing with, I think that this will do this for not only people of color, but women and any actors who are in this position. I think what he's doing takes big fucking balls. and probably really is going to be detrimental and hurtful to his career. I'm not saying he'll never work again, because obviously he's already working, and good on the people that are working with him, because he deserves to work. He's ridiculously talented and he didn't do anything wrong. You know, he's not the one who did something. He's just the one speaking out about it. But I understand studios who are trying to make money, and putting my business hat on, once they already decided to not listen to him, which never should have been a decision they made. They should be listening to their people of color on roles that are people of color, especially if nobody in their creative team are people of color. Once they did that, the whole thing was kind of fucked, because any kind of shakeups are not one person. It's so many people, and it sounds like they need a major overhaul. There are some people who work for that company who are great. You guys know I'm a massive Warner Brothers fan in terms of the stuff that they make. I'm a huge DC supporter. I love DC. I love the content. I love the art. And maybe even me doing this video is probably detrimental to my career. Knowing that I want to be an actress, knowing that it would be my dream to be a DC superhero, talking about this here probably is very dangerous for my career. But Ray Fisher's story deserves to be seen and heard. It deserves to be talked about, because again, no, this is not getting the attention that it deserves. And he's a real person. And this really happened to him. And he's really speaking out about it. And I feel like it's my job to make sure that that story is heard. So I'm not calling anybody in here. I'm not sitting here and saying that anybody is one way. But there are some apologies that are owed. And in terms of leadership positions, I do believe that companies really, really need to look at hiring, and we've talked about this so many times, more diverse staff. And especially if you're going to have one of your main characters be somebody who is Black, and you're not going to listen, you're not going to have a Black writer or Black director or a Black studio exec, and you're going to have a Black actor who's willing to talk to you about this character being Black, then you really need to fucking listen to him. You really need to listen to him. So, yeah. All right, we are going to be getting out of here because we have been here for an hour and 16 minutes. And y'all know my Postmates has been sitting outside for a while. But let's see what it is that you guys are talking about. Anything that you guys want to be said in the last couple minutes as we get out of here. Streamlabs it in, streamlabs.com/Roxy Striar. Bojack says, hi, Roxy. Thank you for taking the time to dedicate your whole show today to breaking down Ray Fisher's story. Like you said, not a lot of people are talking about it, or maybe tired of talking about it, but there's a lot of new info that should be heard. Yeah, there is a lot of new info. I think it was hard to section out all of the info, and this kind of brought it all into one place, and especially with the new interview. I think it was the most cohesive this story has ever been. So I'm really glad that they were able to do it. And thank you to all of you rock stars who are in here who have broken this story down with me. So much appreciated to you guys. Thank you for being here. And if you guys have any other questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the comments afterwards. Please give 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Like this video. I'm going to continue doing conversations like this. They're a little challenging to talk about, but I feel like deserve to have a place. Yeah. Love you guys a lot. And I am getting out of here. So again, I'll keep refreshing until I go, but you guys know our daily reminders: Brett, Miles, Jonathan, arrest the cops who killed Breonna Taylor, all 3 of them for killing Breonna Taylor, justice for the people who've lost their lives due to excessive force, put down your toilet seat and your lid in a completely different tone because it's a roller coaster show. We don't want those flumes. Don't trump the Holocaust. We already know it's just never fucking good to do. Hope everybody had a happy Pesach because we are a couple days out from that. Make your bed, check on your internet, blow on it, all of that stuff. And I will see you guys tomorrow live at the Roxy. I will probably be back right around that 1 p.m. time. I know I was a little late going up today, but I was really trying to dissect this article to get all of the information that I could, saying it for all of us. And in case it needs to continue to be said, which apparently it still effing does. Thank you, John Bainbridge, for saying hashtag Black Lives Matter. This we know and we believe wholeheartedly here live at the Roxy. So thank you guys all for joining. Much love to you. Stay safe, stay sane. We stand with Ray Fisher, and I will see you guys tomorrow, 1 p.m. live at the Roxy.